Hello and welcome to Easy Money with Don Anders. I'm here with Matt Repass, and Matt is a financial advisor in Ocean City, Maryland. And he's been working. How long have you been in the business, Matt?
35 years now.
35 years. So there's a lot of knowledge and experience. Matt's seen pretty much every market cycle we can see at this point. And we're
back
here
to Black Monday.
Exactly. So, and we're here basically to talk about, you've seen all these different market cycles, but what are the three big risks that people face in their retirement in 2021?
The three that we boil it down to is understanding that you have to, in going through retirement, because it's different than ever before, you've got to manage the market risk, obviously, which people are most aware of. You now have the challenge of longevity risk that our parents and grandparents didn't have to deal with so much because they had automatic retirements of pensions and Social Security. They had mailbox money, which showed up every 30 days. Their investments, while they were probably worried about them, weren't so concerned for their day-to-day living like we do now when we don't have pensions. So we've got the market risk that we got to manage. We have longevity risk. We're living longer than ever before. I saw a 60 Minutes piece, sometime earlier this summer, that said 50% of the people born today will live to an average age of 100 to 104. So hearing the average age in this country of age 80, that's a midpoint. That means half of us are going to make it and half of us are going to go well beyond that. So this is something, longevity risk is a challenge. And then we have the tax or the legislative risk, the moving target that Congress gets to vote on how much of their retirement money they're going to take from you going through time. And that, to me, is probably the biggest risk because we can't really put our finger on it that we have going.
Yeah, and I actually did a video on how rising taxes is probably the biggest risk to your retirement. Go ahead and link that up above. But let's take a step back and let's start with market risk, because you say that market risk is one of the biggest in 2021. Isn't the market risk always a big deal? Isn't it always an issue? Or why is it specifically a risk in 2021?
Well, it is always an issue, but here we are in 2021, and honestly, we have not seen, we can talk about last year numerically, the COVID downturn in the market. While numerically it was a bear market because it fell below 25%, it also recovered within a span of a couple of months. Traditional bear markets last on average 18 months and takes 5 years on average of recovery. We haven't seen one of these events since 2007. On average, we will see one of these events every 5 to 7 years. Now, what does my 35 years of experience give me? I've been through many of these events. Not 12 months after I got into the business, the 87 market crash, the biggest decline of stock market history, occurred. And we haven't seen any of these things happen for 12 years. In a recent class that I did, I asked the attendees, I said, there are people out in our business right now, Don, that can have 10, 12 years of experience and have never seen a market crash. So how can they convey to you, the potential retiree or client, this kind of risk when they've never seen it and never been through it?
And conversely, also, you might know, if you're watching this, you might know somebody who's been retired for 10 years. And you say that person's been retired for 10 years and they must know what retirement's all about. It must know what it's like, but realize that's not a long time, right? As we're going to get into longevity risk, you might be retired for 30, 40 years. You might be retired longer than you worked. And so somebody who's only been retired for 10 years, they have seen nothing but sunny days and puppy dogs in their retirement. Right. So, and if you take a look at the people, from my experience, the people I meet with that are in their late 70s, early 80s, who were retired in 2007 and saw what happened to their portfolios and their friends' portfolios, they're very conservative because they know what can go wrong. But then if you have people who have only been retired since 2009 and 2010, they're more aggressive because all they've known is up markets, right? And so you have to be careful. Number one, taking advice from friends and family, right? Who have that short sight. Number two, even financial advisors like Matt is saying, because financial advisors who were not in the business in 2007, 2008, don't know. I remember in 2007, I worked a lot with schools. So I would literally go into the schools and talk with people. And I remember I walked in right after the market crash in 2007. And one of the ladies said, "How dare you show your face?" She wasn't even my client. She just knew as a financial advisor, right? But she was so upset with the market condition. And actually she became a client, believe it or not. I said, "If you're that upset, we should talk." And she's still a client to this day. But those are the types of things you have to take a look at, because if you think that the market is never going to correct, I have some bad news for you. It is. Eventually, you will, in your lifetime, if you're 100% in S&P 500, you will, in your lifetime, statistically lose half your money. It's going to happen. It will happen. So let's talk about, okay, so we've had COVID, we've had shutdowns, businesses aren't still fully back. Why is the market as high as it is right now?
My sister's name, Tina, Tina. It's an acronym thrown around our business at these junctures of a market cycle. And the acronym stands for there is no alternative. The reason people are piling money into the stock market today, and it is doing illogically continuing to go up even while economies are struggling and the global economy is struggling, is there are no other alternatives. CDs. I went into my local bank, their 5-year CD rate, 0.5%. You can borrow money at 0%. Bonds, treasuries, 10-year treasury bond, which every instrument in our financial system is basically marked upon, a 10-year government treasury, 1.3, maybe 1.5. So when you have no other alternative, and the stock market has done nothing but, like you said, rainbows and fluffy clouds, blue skies, no storms on the horizon. Hey, let's put money in the market. The Tale of Two Decades video that I have on my YouTube channel talks about this conundrum we're in. Is where are we looking at this? Where is our next decade? Is it going to be like the last 10 years where a market has gone up essentially on a 45-degree angle? Or is it going to be like the first decade of this century where the S&P actually lost money?
And if you look at what the experts are saying, a lot of them are expecting the market to only return 2 to 4% over the next 10 years. And that's, because you're going to have ups and downs. But let's say you're the most optimistic person ever, and you say, yeah, well, I think the next decade we're going to keep going. Okay, but how about the following decade? Because you might be retired 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And what I tell people all the time is you need to have an all-weather plan. Something that does well, keeps up with the economy when everything goes up. But when everything goes down, you're not panicking and acting irrationally. So you need to make sure you have an all-weather plan in your portfolio. And a lot of people do not. And a lot of people only have sunny day plans. So I completely agree. I think the market right now is one of the biggest risks. And it's probably the riskiest the market's ever been. It's at all-time highs. And in addition to what you said, the other reason the market's so high is we've had quantitative easing, right? We've had the government print money and basically dump it into businesses and dump it into individuals and make sure that people had enough money to buy. And also kind of go into that Tina thing. There's no other alternative. you might say, well, there is alternatives. How about Bitcoin? Well, guess what? Look how high Bitcoin is because there's no other alternative, right? How about real estate? Look how high real estate is because there is no other alternative. Everywhere that there can be an alternative is high right now because the government has repressed interest rates to encourage borrowing, to spur on the economy. And so something as small as a 2 or 3% interest rate hike could be detrimental for bonds, could be detrimental for the stock market, could be detrimental for Bitcoin, could be detrimental for real estate, because as soon as somebody can get 4% guaranteed, are they selling that stock and putting it in there? Are they selling that? They're probably definitely selling the bond, right? And so there's risk all there that you have to take into consideration. And if you're watching this and saying, I'm just going to put my head in the sand like an ostrich and hope it doesn't happen, that is not a plan. That's a retirement hope. Okay. So just make sure you know that. All right, let's move on to the next, the number 2 biggest one. Let's go into longevity. Okay. So now you mentioned that 50% of all people born today will live to be 100 and 104. I actually read a book about, there was a book that talked about how some scientists believe that if you can live to 2050, that between technology and growth and everything else, that the average life expectancy might bump up to 150 or beyond, because they're going to be so good at solving longevity, printing organs, doing things, everything that normally kills us, they can regenerate at that point. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what some people say. That's what some scientists say. We've definitely seen the increase in age, right? So we've definitely seen where Social Security is first set up. Full Social Security age was 65.
Right.
The average life expectancy was 65. So back then it was hey, if you live to this age, congratulations, we'll pay you for the rest of your life, because they didn't think it was going to be that long.
Right.
Now, the average life expectancy is around 84 to 86, depending on your age and your gender. So with that, as longevity rises, as people are living longer, why is that a risk? Isn't that a good thing, Matt?
Well, I call it a blessing or a curse. The blessing is, yes, we're living longer. We'll have more time to enjoy, but you said it earlier. There's never been a point in our history where our retired lives could be as long, if not longer, than our working careers. And that is probably going to be not the exception, but the rule.
Oh, yeah.
And how are we going to stretch our money out over that time? Even if we take a reduced income compared to what we were living on while we were working, we still got to stretch it out over 30 to 40 years, because I start every class I do with the research studies done each year. They poll Americans on what their greatest fears were. Well, when I started in 1986, and it seems ancient history now, the first and biggest fear of the Americans in that year was dying. The second was speaking in public. Most people felt like if I had to speak in public, I would die. Today, it's running out of our money is our largest fear, and followed closely by what happens if I go to a nursing home or assisted living and need to spend all my money and impoverish my spouse. I've seen that happen. So why is longevity a blessing and a curse? We have more time. I have a 1-year-old grandson right now, and I will do anything. You see the pictures behind me. I will do anything for that little boy. So I want to spend time. I want to see him pitch in the major leagues, if that's possible. But I'll be 80 years old if that's going to happen. So longevity, a blessing. Why is it a curse? It's a risk multiplier. What do I mean by that? Well, we know markets, the longer you're around, you're going to get hit with a stock market collapse.
Yep.
If your life's only a couple of years long, you may avoid one. But if it's stretched out over 20, 30 years, you are going to see not just one, maybe 3, 4 market calamities. And as you said, it's going to remove 50% of your money if you're not allocated correctly. So it multiplies that market risk that we have.
Yep.
And then the other risk that we face, the legislative risk, because next year we'll get vote.
We'll get into that for taxes, right?
Yeah.
So let's real quick with the longevity. So Matt brought up a really good point about the number one fear of people being retired or in retirement is running out of money. When I do presentations, I usually mention that. And I say, you know what that means? That means that you guys are more afraid of running out of money than you are dying. And then everyone laughs and starts shaking their head. They're like, yeah, we are. We'd rather die than run out of money and be destitute.
And that's so 35 years. It's changed completely to that.
Yeah. And if you had an average life expectancy of 5 to 10 years, sure, that's you can manage your money and that's it. But as people live longer, and we don't know what technology is going to solve, right? What happens if they come up with a cure for cancer? Right, or a cure for heart disease? Now all of a sudden, overnight, the life expectancy gets bumped to 100 for everybody. Are you planning for that? And sometimes I'll talk with people and they'll say, yeah, I'm not going to live to 90. Okay, well, you don't think you will. Maybe you probably won't. But what if you do? You're going to go live in a cardboard box? No, we're not having that done. So you need to make sure that you have a plan, because whether or not you want to, you might. Okay. All right. So
we have to plan in our business that everyone does.
Oh yeah.
And they don't.
I tell so when we do, so big part of what we like to do is if you want to leave money to beneficiaries, we like to offer guaranteed life insurance. Basically it's paid up. It's guaranteed as long as you live. And I always take it out to 121. And people will say, well, why? I'm not going to live past 100. Okay, but I'm not going to take the risk with my career, my license that you do.
Right.
We're going to make sure. And also, I'm not going to take the risk with your kids that you do.
Right.
So we're going to go out to 121 just to make sure. And you're going to pay the extra $10 a month. And usually they chuckle and say, okay.
What's unique about the 121 is when I started, again, back to my ancient history here, every life insurance policy, when I got into the business, matured or endowed at age 100. And we have those industry magazines that we look at from time to time, and they'd have a picture of this old guy who's sitting there with one of those big ceremonial checks, and he made it to age 100 with a life insurance company exec saying, old Joe made it to 100, he got paid his life insurance. Now, every company you and I work with, actuarially, their life insurance policies go to 121 to 127.
Yep.
And I tell this to people and they're like, whoa, hang on. And they say that's not possible. It's not, it's as possible as living to 100 was 30 years ago.
Exactly.
So we've got to, medical science is a wonderful thing, and longevity in the risk that it brings, the blessing that it brings, and the curse that it brings is a big deal.
Completely agree. All right, let's go into taxes. I know you're excited about that. That's a big. I'm
not excited about it.
Excited to talk to everybody about it. So that's a big talking point of what both of us talk about. And sometimes one of my favorite, and we actually had Tom Hegna on. We've had a few other people on the podcast, and one of my favorite sayings is actually by David McKnight. And David McKnight goes, people think that rising taxes is a political risk. They think that rising taxes, is a risk that only one side or the other can have. No, it's a mathematical risk, right? Because eventually, it doesn't matter who's in office, we are in debt. And that debt, massive debt, and going more, every president in the last 4 years or four terms, the last 4 presidents have all increased it drastically. So the issue is we keep going more and more into debt, and eventually we're going to have to pay it off. And what I tell people all the time is, the biggest way to if you get in debt personally, how do you pay it off? And somebody will say, go get another job, right? Make more money. Well, the government doesn't get another job. You know what they do? They sign a bill and they increase your taxes by 10 or 15% or whatever it is.
Right.
And what most people don't realize is if you have a pension, you have Social Security, you have 401k, you have IRA, all of that money probably is taxable, right? And so what happens if they raise taxes by 10 or 15 or 20, or even to where it's historically been, if you look at most years in US history at 40%, all of a sudden now you're making 20 to 30% less than you were making the day before. So Matt, let's get into kind of why you think taxes are, I got into why I think it's the biggest risk, but why do you think the taxes right now and legislative risk is the biggest risk out there?
Well, you said it, this massive debt that we have, we can't keep kicking the can down the road. If we love our children and our grandchildren, our parents said this too, you know, what are we leaving our heirs? What's the household finances? If we look at it on the individual level out to the governmental level, if we simply say we as individuals can't manage our home affairs until we run out of credit, which the government will never do because we can still turn on printing presses, which doesn't work. But why is it such a big issue is you mentioned Social Security. Right now, Social Security has 3 levels of taxation. 0, which many people don't realize they can pay 0% tax on their Social Security if they manage their affairs correctly. And that's
with
why
the exception of people who have forced income like RMDs, if you've already gotten there, or pensions or something like that.
Right.
But with RMDs, you could actually make it so when you hit RMD age, if you do it correctly, you won't have to pay tax on your Social Security. Correct.
Exactly.
Yep.
They could add, there's a 0, there's a 50% and an 85% level. Well, an administration or a candidate could say, I'm not going to raise taxes, but they come in and vote to add 100% level taxation to Social Security. Hey, I didn't raise any taxes. No, but I changed the game.
Yep.
The same thing goes with deductions. If you earn $100,000 and you have a $20,000 standard deduction, you have an $80,000 adjusted gross income. Well, let's not change the taxes, but let's cut the deductions in half. Now your adjusted gross income is $90,000 instead of $80,000. Are you paying more taxes? Yes. Right now, as we sit here today with inflation rearing its ugly head, the cost of gasoline is up 50% from where it is. There is increased massive. I went to the store the other day. I grew up working in a grocery store and as a meat cutter in my younger years. Hamburger on sale, $5.99 a pound. Yeah. Tell me if anyone's looked at that lately.
Well, and it's also that also has to do with the supply chain and all of that as well, with everything that's going on. Going back to why the markets aren't as stable as you think they are, right?
Right.
There's a run. So I went to a restaurant and the chicken wings were market price chicken wings, right? Like it was something
lobster.
Like it was langoustine that they imported from another country.
Right.
It was market price chicken wings because the wing prices were changing at such a rapid rate. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, you have all of these things factor in to where eventually you're probably going to see some taxes because they keep when we talked about how the market was falsely propped up kind of by the quantitative easing. Guess how we pay for that? Eventually, either us or our kids or our grandkids are going to pay for it. And those of you, I've seen news articles and people talk about how, you know, it's fine. It's just, you know, we're selling bonds and it's not a big deal to go into debt and everything else. Go look and see what happened to Greece. If you just go look to the Greek economy, I mean, they basically sold bonds to everyone and it just went out of control. And eventually in 2008, it all came crashing down, right?
Right.
So for us to avoid that, for us to maintain one of the biggest superpowers in the world, we're going to have to increase taxes. And for those of you who think the taxes won't increase, guess what? In 2025, if Congress just does nothing, taxes will increase. Yes. It's already set in stone. They're already set to increase in 2025.
Right.
I also did a video with David McKnight on when he thinks taxes will increase. I'll go ahead and link that above. And then in addition to that, I'm going to link, Matt talked about some of the videos he's on his channel. I'm going to go ahead and link that below, as well as his website. If you want to get in touch with him and his firm, we're going to link that as well. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate the time. We'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching my video. If you want more information about retirement, investing, making money easy, you can go ahead and click here. Or if you'd like to subscribe, it really helps the channel. And then you also get updates when we release new information. You can click here to do that. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great